I do not actually have the right words to introduce this guy. When I get, requests or friends tell me you have to talk to this person, sometimes I, hold my reservations. I look at the person, but when I got this invite that you could interview this guy, guys, I almost fainted. I'm telling you. If you know me, I love music. And the foundation of my love for music is hip hop. Everything else falls on the side to that. And I'm so privileged today to have someone in studio who's not only inspired, he's walked the walk and talked the talk. Fab Five Freddy. If you don't know, you're about to know. Welcome.
Thank you so much. That was such a great introduction. It's great to be here with you.
I really thought about everything I wanted to pack in the introduction, but then I also reminded myself that a lot of the people who are going to watch, on my show, are Gen Z and Millennials.
So you may not know.
They might not know. So if I start throwing in words there, I'm just making it flowery for them.
Yeah.
I don't want to hook anyone. This is a conversation that you must listen to if you love art, if you love music, and especially if you're passionate about what it is that you have been put on this earth to do, and you're wondering, will I make an impact? You got to listen to this man's story.
Wow.
Fab Five Freddy.
Well, I'm so happy to be here. I've been in Kenya now a little more than a week. First time, and I'm loving it. Nairobi specifically.
Yeah?
Yes, went to the National Forest yesterday, a little safari trip with a friend, and it was just amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, loving it all.
I tell people that you can go anywhere in the world. I know people say this about their countries, right? But the only country that's not lying is Kenya. You can go anywhere in the world, but there's no place like home. There's just something about Kenya. It's at the equator. The weather is always great. And I speak as somebody who hates winter, so. I like having sun.
Yes, it's all good.
How long have you been in Nairobi? You said a week.
Yeah, a little more than a week now. I'll be here for about another week, and I'll be back quite often because I guess we'll get to what we're trying to do business-wise here. We're setting something up, but a good friend of mine that set this up, who you know well, Troy White, who's a longtime friend of mine back in New York, has been living here now for over 10 years and has been really laying out the roadmap and the blueprint of what's going on. Yeah. He's also become the Pied Piper in America, getting a lot of our friends, a lot of Black Americans to come see, and then some of like, I'm staying. Yeah. So Troy White is the guy that's such a perfect guide. You know, I've traveled a lot, as I'm sure you have, but when you get to some place that you've never been, if you can meet that right person that's got their finger on the pulse, because I've worked in culture, usually meet people that know what's going on in culture where they are, and so it always helps cut to the chase as opposed to just being the average tourist with a tour guide, or you just checked a couple of websites, which is all good, but Troy's got it dialed in, so it's amazing, the nuances and just the essences of the people that I'm picking up on. I like it.
I could say so many things about Troy, but I feel like you've encapsulated it so well. But I'm going to have a conversation with Troy on this pod as well, because about some of his work of bringing African Americans and just being that connect here in Kenya.
So important.
Because there's many conversations around that. But it's so good to have you, and I want us to dive deep. But you mentioned culture, and you know, it's so interesting how you sit right in the center of like culture, and not just hip hop, just the arts, the art scene.
Yes, correct.
Growing up, I'd see graffiti on walls, and I remember asking myself, like, how is this person allowed? Because in school, if you try to write on the wall,
it's a problem.
That's detention straight up.
Yeah, no, it's a problem.
So it got me thinking, like, I always used to ask myself, who is this courageous person who just decided, I'm going to draw somewhere where everybody's going to see a public space? Yeah. So tell me, how did you get started and said, you see this public space? Yeah. Oh, I'm going to put my art here.
Right. So my theory on how graffiti developed, and the graffiti that happened in New York, ironically, Troy being from Philly, also developed in Philly at the same time. This is going back into the 1970s. What I feel happened was, it was obviously coming out of the 60s and still in the 70s, civil rights, people protesting against the war. Counterculture had developed and was going against the system for just getting things wrong, for treating people wrong, like civil rights, treat me like a human being. No, we shouldn't be fighting in Vietnam. Let's end this war.
Yeah.
White kids growing their hair long, learning and supporting other people's struggles, women's rights, women want to vote, and all those things. All those things have been going on, and as a kid growing up, we saw all this stuff on TV in America. It was like the Black Panthers, Revolution, all of that stuff, rock and roll, every black soul record having at least one track that talked about, rising up and getting our stuff together and say it loud, I'm black and I'm proud. All of that stuff, I think, inspired a kind of a rebelliousness against the system. So people began to just write their names, following political sloganeers that would just write political stuff. It became a thing to write your name and go against the system. And then in New York City, which has a very competitive energy, it's like, oh, that guy wrote his name. I seen his name 4 or 5 places. Oh, I'm gonna write my name and I'm gonna do it in 7 or 8 places. And then other people wanted to do it. So it just developed and kind of exploded and mushroomed, if you will, into really just was an adolescent teenage activity. As that grew more and more and more, and then guys like, well, I'm gonna outdo you, and I'm gonna figure out a way to make my name bigger. I'm gonna make my name with more colors. I'm gonna spray my name way up there. I'm gonna figure out how to do that. A lot of this went on and on and on, and the graffiti movement in New York, that's my take on how that developed and happened, and then out of that grew a real creative way to express yourself. Techniques were developed with the spray can, blending colors, getting 3-dimensional shadows on your letters and stuff. Once again, a total illegal act. I don't, advocate for you guys to anybody.
Because as he's talking, I'm just like, okay.
Yeah, it's wild.
He does like things that are on the fringe, and we're going to talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's it, baby.
Which is a question I was going to ask you later, but like, as somebody who does graffiti, when you're going to cities, does it stand out to you?
It's amazing the way all of this has happened, and I sometimes feel slightly responsible when I'm not just in any city in America, but in any city in the world. When I'm on the train going from England to Germany, and you're on one of those European trains, and there's graffiti pieces everywhere. It's quite astonishing, and whatever, it is what it is. But I think the thing is, it's a form of expression that is now established. This is something that I'm proud to say that I kind of help lead, if you will, because the whole idea for me was, giving you that background on graffiti, my little theory on it is, and I did it as a tagger and with no kind of real creative inclination behind doing it. At a point, I'm looking at pop art, just a kid that loves books, in museums. I used to cut school and go to the museums in New York City. I got very familiar and uncomfortable with these pop artists that happened in the 60s that were taking their ideas from comic books, advertising, and making paintings fine art that can be exhibited in galleries and then hopefully museums. And I said, wait a minute, us as graffiti artists were influenced by similar stuff. Comic books, advertising. I want to be an artist and make paintings out of this stuff too, and have my stuff in galleries and museums. And I thought that was a cool thing to do. And so that became a mission, how to figure that out. And I was kind of able to figure it out, I guess, to a certain extent.
It's a very interesting, you talk about it like it's something so light, but like for an artist to move from something, every artist innately knows that their art is great. Innately, right? Like, it's something you want to show somebody else, which means it's something that you feel.
Right.
But like, position it. Sometimes you could be in the wrong audience. You could be, when they say, oh, his art was before his time, maybe just the audience wasn't the right one. You were going to the museum and then discovered, hey, my audience, the way I've positioned my art is not the way these guys have positioned their art. So
Right.
it was like branding. And so connecting with the right people. And it's really interesting you mentioned that, because one genre of the art needed another genre to support it, to be able to tell the story of your art. How getting into film, tell us about that.
How I got into film?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have this idea that I'm trying to figure out how I can be an artist, and other people from where I'm from. I was also didn't like growing up the fact that oftentimes in the media in New York, television news, daily newspapers, they would focus on crimes when many different types of people do bad things, do crimes or whatever. They would always blow up Black and Latin people, the street people of New York, young people, as the face of crime, you know, and it made a very, it kind of stigmatized us, and I didn't like that, because I knew they were definitely putting an emphasis on, let's focus on this and make that a big story. Yeah. And I said, man, that's negative, the way they're depicting us. And so in thinking of a way to become a visual artist and to fit myself and others like me into that art gallery space, I had to circumvent what the typical blueprint was, which people went to art school, they go to college, get degrees, and then go around the galleries and show them their slides. I didn't think that was going to happen, especially because in the contemporary art scene, there weren't many people of color. So I was like, you know, figure out a way in, and I had different strategies about how to do this, but one of the things I thought was, man, if we can make a movie that can put us in a better light and show us in a creative space, that could change the narrative of how so much media tends to always make a young Black kid with his hat to the side, sneakers on, and a tracksuit look like he's just automatically a criminal. And so I thought about a movie, and also when I had this idea for this film, hip-hop is barely even, well, it's going on underground in the streets, in parties, in the Bronx, but also in other areas of the city. Very few records, if you will, had happened. It was, even before records were made, I was thinking of this as a teenager, 18, 19, I'm thinking of all this stuff. And so I said, man, and to even make it bigger, if you could connect the other things that happened in the street that weren't yet linked, the idea of the graffiti painting, the idea of this new music, this DJing, scratching, and rapping in its infancy, and the breakdancing. I thought, man, if we could show that all as one thing, it would make us look like we're creatives, because we were. Let's focus on what we were doing. And so the idea to make this film, and I thought of it as one of those independent films, I was able to get that done. That became hip-hop's first film, Wild Style. And so that also was very independent, super low budget. I met this white filmmaker, Charlie Ahern, at a big art show as I'm beginning to figure out my way into the art. It was really underground, really grimy. A bunch of underground artists all took over. It's called the Times Square Show. And at this show, I met this guy that was Charlie Ahern, and I pitched him this idea to make a film showcasing graffiti, rap, breaking, make it one thing, and he loved the idea. So we began to work on that, and I kind of learned filmmaking at the same time. That became hip-hop's first feature film called Wild Style. And that's where people first saw these ideas of the breaking, the rapping, the graffiti. And the other idea we came up with was to use the original artists to pretty much play themselves in the movie. Yeah. So the rappers are the actual rappers, the graffiti writers, the break dancers were the Rocksteady crew. It was not an idea at all in my head to be in the movie, because I was trying to always just play the background, you know, be a puppeteer. But at the 11th hour before we went into production, there was this one character that was the link between the graffiti scene and the hip-hop scene, like this guy that was the promoter of the parties at these clubs. And Charlie, who was the director, talked me into playing that role, so I ended up being one of the stars of the film. I play a character named Fade. But then I also created the original music, because I wanted to use the original records that the DJs would use to cut these incredible breakbeat records with incredible grooves, you know, like Apache or dance to the drummer's beat, or any of you DJs out there know what I'm talking about. But Charlie was like, no, let's make our own music. So I went into the studio and then figured out how to create the original break beats, if you will, that became the base of the Wild Style soundtrack. And when we were filming live in the Bronx and whatever, that recorded music on the beats that I made became the soundtrack for the film.
You know, it's interesting. When we think about hip hop, most people think about the artist, the one who's actually on the microphone, the one who's delivering. Nobody thinks about, well, a lot of people don't think about the other links to people because it's a culture, and a culture is carried by everybody that's participating in it. And actually, I've always wanted to ask, what is the first hip hop song? I know that they say it's Big Back.
Okay, that's a good question. So there's several that can vie for that title. There were some local independent singles released. In the beginning of hip hop on record, it was just one song, and then the B-side would be the instrumental. Mm-hmm. There was no structure to how rapping went yet. So people would rap for 10, 15 minutes. The original Rap is Delight, they might go on for 15 minutes. Because the structure wasn't there. Because at parties, DJs would play a beat, people would just get on the mic, you know, talk their stuff, and the next person would get on and maybe and talk their stuff or whatever. So there was a handful of different singles. The Rap is Delight became the first big rap single to go national, commercial, everywhere. But there were several singles that came out in New York on little labels. Enjoy label released a couple of records by Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five. Super rap, and I was crashing at Troy's house for the last few days, and while he's out watching football, the super rapping, one of the first record that Grandmaster Flash and I'm rapping like crazy, played it about 10 times because I hadn't heard it, you know, with early, which really mirrors how the early rap groups performing in the Bronx would do it. Yeah. So there was several that came out, but there were several, like I said, singles that were released locally in New York. The Fatback Band released a record that had rap on it. Yes. We knew it wasn't official. I think it was, the rapper was King Tim III. Nobody knew who this guy was. But anyway, it began like that. But the Rap is Delight, which is an unfortunate story because one of the artists took verbatim lyrics from a noted Bronx rapper named Grandmaster Caz.
Casanova Fly.
Casanova Fly, that's right. Very good.
I told you I love hip hop.
Kwamba knows what's going on. Kwamba, I said it right.
And I also, Kwambox, and I also know that Grandmaster Caz actually now sings on the same beat later, trying to explain what happened.
He did. He's a classy guy, man. He's featured in Wild Style, his group, the Cold Crush Brothers. And the guy that was on the Sugar Hill Records, his name was Big Bang Hank, worked at a pizza parlor, but was Kaz's manager. But this is rap in the street, just playing street parties and playing in school gyms and stuff like that. And he took verbatim Grandmaster Kaz's rap, even saying I'm Casanova Fly, which was Kaz's name, on Rap is Delight, which goes on to be a humongously big record, which really introduced this thing to a whole lot of people who had no idea there was a real scene. A lot of people thought of it as just, this is some novelty form where some people are just rapping to the rhythmic situation. They didn't know there was a real rooted culture that had developed in the streets, primarily in the Bronx, that record came out of. And so that opened the floodgates of this could be a big commercial situation.
Sitting in New York in the 70s, and I know you had an idea of your own art because you were making investments, going to the museums. I don't know who cuts school to go to museums. Please, just in the comment section. You know what I'm saying? Unless there's a club called Museum. But anyway, to each their own. So you're already making investments in your own art style.
Yeah.
But looking at hip hop, you're hanging out with people. You know, when I tend to look at such a time as, you know, in different cities around Africa, there's so many fledgling sounds. You know, so it's almost like that time in the 70s. And, you know, sometimes there's a sound in TZ
In
which
where?
is in Tanzania.
Okay. You
It's
call
not
it
too far. It's right here near.
TZ?
TZ, yeah.
It's like the slang. Okay, I like that. TZ,
yeah.
okay.
They have this sound. I forget the name. Producer put it there. This sound, right? And it clearly has some hip hop roots in there.
Yeah.
Most people hear the sound and they're like, ugh! You know, it's like sharpening the ears or something,
Wow.
right? But it's at the fledgling stage, you know,
Interesting.
where one day people are going to be looking back and go like, oh, I mess with this sound, just like hip hop right now.
Yes,
So in the
yes.
70s, when you're doing your graffiti and the DJs are, you know, doing their thing and
Yeah.
the producers are doing their thing and, you know, this sound is starting to get off the ground. Did you ever think it was going to be what it is right now?
No, I couldn't see this far down the line. Literally, this is like, we're talking 40 plus, 50, in fact, 50 years from the first party that happened in the Bronx, early 70s. When that first party happened, by the way, it was not yet called anything. We didn't know what it was. It was just this thing we were doing that was an offshoot of other mobile DJs that were happening. By the way, I have a memoir that I wrote that will be coming out in March. It's called Everybody's Fly. And I tell my story and a lot of the story of what we're talking about now and the connections that I made and all these key factors in it all. But a key thing that happened, and I hope it happens in TZ, as well as what's going on with Afrobeats and Amapiano, which I'm listening to, I'm seeing like, you know, kind of fledgling. What really elevated hip-hop was the fact that, like I said, when the first rap records came out, there was no structure. Guys would rap for 10 minutes, 12 minutes. There was no, like, you know, 16-bar chorus, 4-bar break, all these, like, technical things that, you know, are the blueprint for how songs are made.
Yeah.
What began to happen was, along the lines of the competition that was rooted in New York, like in graffiti. Like, I'm gonna do it better than you, my dude. I'm gonna do more than you. Or you rapping? Okay, I'm gonna do a rap that's better. And so that outdoing each other thing pushed the form aggressively. Then when the opportunity to make records came in, people and producers were coming in to challenge the form and capture the essence. When the Sugar Hill records came out, they would get bands to replay the popular song that DJs had found that became popular on the street rap scene. They just copied it. It sounded good, like Chic's Good Times, which was a huge record that hip-hop DJs loved to cut and scratch and rappers rap over. Sugar Hill just had a band play that cleanly. So producers wanted to figure out how to capture the raw, gritty essence that you would feel at those parties. And producers then began to bring those things to the table. People like Marley Marr, and different people, Larry Smith, that produced the early Run DMC records as well as Houdini records, were crafting ways of making these records, being unique, capturing the flavor of the sounds, but also structuring the records with like hooks and choruses so they can become, you know, radio friendly, if you will. You don't want a song to go, you can't play a 10, 15-minute song on an average radio station.
Yeah.
So that developed rather rapidly soon after Rapper's Delight came out in the early 80s. And then it accelerated and more things began to happen and people began to step into the realm of how to make records, how to make sound that's true to the core of what this was. Like even Grandmaster Flash, Melly, Run DMC, LL Cool J, and those guys from Queens and Long Island and whatever were listening to tapes of the Cold Crush and those guys in the Bronx, and they wanted to emulate them, but then they put their own twist on it. But that was a kind of an example of how this whole form began to grow. And I like to look at it as the roots got a chance to go really deep because the aspirations were just to be, hey man, I'm trying to be somebody in my neighborhood. And the aspirations were not to just make millions of dollars. That was not, I mean, you could fantasize and you would make up stuff about all the stuff you had, but it was all fantasy and we all knew. Those things have become true now in a major way. Yeah. But at that time, the motivations were very humble, very real, and the roots, I feel, went really deep and strong, which I think is why hip hop, to this moment, is the most listened to music on any streaming platform around the world. And I'm excited to see the development of other African sounds, and would love to help out, guidance, in, a little game on how people could really, like for instance, in just discussing the Afrobeat phenomenon, which is incredible and getting tons of airplay in America, I'm beginning to feel that some of it is kind of leveling out, and I'm not seeing enough acts really push it beyond the way Burna Boy has. And not that every act can do what he is, but I think they need to figure out how to broaden. And there's so much content that we can talk about. A lot of Afrobeats to me is incredible, but a lot of it feels love songy, which is okay. But there's so much more, like in terms of as Africans still work to get rid of the colonial mindset and find out who they truly are, which is right there. We've been doing this way before Europe got civilized. You feel me? We was here making things happen. Mansa Musa, building the pyramids, that's us. That's why they broke all the noses off them pyramids, because they didn't want people to really know who was really doing all this. That's why they try to separate the Middle East and act like it's not a part of this here continent, and that these, black people and them Cushites wasn't doing this. So I think there's some information that artists can put together with some hot tracks and some grooves and beats. I think it'd be extremely beneficial for other Africans as well as folks in America, Black Americans, everybody's included.
That's so interesting that you mentioned that, and we'll come to Afrobeats, but I just want to go back to, there's something you mentioned about competition, and healthy competition can really make things happen, especially in an art space. You mentioned it in hip hop, but you also mentioned it in graffiti, and how the space was growing, and then to have interestingly, one of your friends growing up, who to a lot of us is just an icon, Basquiat.
Oh, Jean-Michel.
Who you call Jean-Michel.
Jean-Michel Basquiat.
To the rest of us.
Oh, wow. Right? Yeah, Jean. That's phenomenal.
It's like, just Jean.
Yes, yes.
It's like my friend Obama,
Yes.
Just obese.
That's so cool. I'm so pleased that people everywhere know about my homie. It's phenomenal.
And it's interesting for my audience, when I see a lot. Actually, when I was waking up this morning, coming to this interview, right on top of my bed, there's this art that a friend of mine gifted me. She was leaving town. Well, I bought it from her, and I was thinking about the right kind of questions to ask around. What do I want to ask? Because you've spoken intricately about your relationship, the art, and then I look at this art in the mirror, and it was influenced by Basquiat. For sure, right? Young artists. And there's so many artists who I'm in love with. I buy art.
Okay.
Who, a lot of them from Tanzania, Morocco, have been influenced by,
It's amazing.
what you guys were doing, in the 80s. And so there's something you mentioned that you guys the movement is going just like the hip hop. But then when it becomes mainstream, it's like they've just discovered it. When my whole life reading about Basquiat, the conversation is like Andy made him, right?
Like what? I'm sorry.
Like Andy Warhol.
Oh God,
made him, and that's a lot of the conversation. It's like he discovered him, just the way the colonialists discovered Mount Kenya.
Or
Lake
Christopher
Victoria.
Columbus discovered America.
You know what I'm saying?
When the Indians had been here quite a while.
But then when you get now into the culture, is when nobody just shows up. There has to be some work that has been done in the background for you to be able to see that. What was life like, especially when you've just done your research, you've rebranded, and now people are resonating with your art, from selling it at a couple of thousands to now, oh my God, people are now resonating with my art. What was the time around that time like?
Well, actually, it was pretty interesting because it happened relatively, in terms of history, it happened rather quickly. But that was good because the plans that were enacted and the connections that happened from that. You know, the timing was right and everything. You know, one of the things that I had thought about when I was trying to strategize about how can we position ourselves into a space to be looked at art, and I had the idea to make this film that became Wild Style, I thought I was also watching the development of the punk rock and the new wave movement, which was some really radical stuff. Like the Sex Pistols were talking about God Save the Queen, she ain't no human being, and it was like really radical. They were kind of challenging the previous generations of rock that had become kind of too comfortable and kind of rich in the perception of a rock star, if you will. So they went at that, and I'd see these articles and I'd read some of the stuff about these guys. And these guys were, we don't even know how to play our instruments, but we're coming. And it was like, I was like, man, this is some wild stuff. These guys seem really wild. I got that they were challenging the established rock and roll that had predated them. And it felt very revolutionary, very confrontational. And I thought, these guys in this scene, or some of these people, may respond to these ideas I had, because graffiti in New York at that time was the scourge. The city would spend $10 million a year plus to try to rid it. There was nothing positive said. It was like we were like the worst of the worst. But I see this bright light that can be shined on the creative aspects that nobody was considering except us. So I thought, if I can get to some of these punk rock people, they might listen to these ideas I have. And the new wave, which was like an offshoot of the punk rock scene. So that was also a part of my plan. And I went to the downtown area, Manhattan, and connected, went to see these bands to get an understanding what this punk rock thing was about. I saw graffiti written in the bathrooms everywhere, just like in the trains were. I felt a connection there. And so I began to meet certain people, and I eventually meet people from a very popular punk new wave band called Blondie. And they were like, and I run all these ideas by them that I just shared with you, and they were like, yeah, we like this stuff. And they were open, and it was like the inkling that these people we could talk to and listen. When I connect with those people and start to get connected on the downtown scene where this is going on, I meet Jean-Michel. And we're like the same age. He's kid from Brooklyn. His dad was an accountant like mine. We're both trying to figure out how to be artists. Jean's mom used to take him to museums a lot. I used to cut school and go to museums, so we both knew a lot about art, going back to the Renaissance, Warhol and pop art, abstract expressionism. I couldn't talk about any of this stuff with the homies in the hood that I would hang out with, but Jean knew all this stuff, so we right away clicked and became kindred spirits. We both were trying to make moves in the same space. And so that's how that began. And the cultural connection that we made. Like the first people to buy paintings from me and from Jean were members of the group Blondie. So we were all like in a crew of really cool, cutting edge people that had come from that counterculture, punk rock, new wave scene. That begins people looking at our work, getting shows in alternative spaces in the downtown scene, New York, not the established galleries, but other like renegade type of shows and exhibits that began to happen. That's how people began to look at the work and began to buy the work. And then Jean took off like a rocket, because Jean-Michel, like me, had looked at art. So I knew back then when Jean really defined his style. Many artists take a minute to figure out their style, so you can work in different styles, it's okay. But I saw early on that Jean has something really unique, and he had looked at the work of artists like Dubuffet, or artists like Cy Twombly, Robert Rauschenberg. These were artists that we were talking about at 18, 19 years old, we were aware of. And I'm like, oh shit, Jean. Like I can remember one day running up on Jean in the West Village. He was like, yo, Fred, I just sold a painting. I had two, but they didn't get the best one. I said, well, where's the other painting? He said, it's right here. And he went under his coat and he pulled out a canvas that he had folded up, and he opened it up. It was all wrinkled and stuff, and just showed it to me on the street. And it looked like, I was like, Jean, what's going on here? Because it looked like a kid, like a crazy adolescent had just scribbled on this thing and drew a car. I said, Jean, what's going on? Because this is my guy. I know he's incredibly intelligent. He says, oh, Fred, no, it's okay. I'm trying to make it look like a 5-year-old kid did it. And this was what he felt was the best one. And I was like, yo, this is my homie, and I know he ain't crazy, so I can't,
You can't tell him the truth.
But that was it. It was a learning process for me and for him as he was exploring and had the boldness to make such wild, radical work. And it was just so many. I tell a lot of these stories in my memoir coming soon, and really get into the realness. Because John, I'm so excited. I mean, it's so sad. It's a combination of I'm always excited about the phenomenal attention that his work gets, the museum shows. The prices are crazy, but it's not about the prices. Too many people get fixated on the prices. I mean, $100 million plus for one painting is astonishing. But it's, and so much of our culture focuses on the price and the cost of things. But that's not where we were coming from. That wasn't the intention. The intention was to embed ourselves in art history, to gain a dominant position in the popular culture. By any means necessary was something Jean and I would say. And that comes from a really famous Malcolm X image and a poster that we both had, and of Malcolm X holding a rifle in his hand, peeking out of his window because they were trying to kill him, which they eventually did. And the bottom of that poster was by any means necessary. That was relative to the image of him protecting his family, but also making this happen and turning these things around by any means necessary. And so that's what me and Jean clicked on, because what I moved on, and I still move on to this day, like to do graffiti, you have to move stealth and be up in things, head on swivel, getting in, getting out, not getting caught, finding a way to get in when you're not supposed to get in, if you will. I'm talking into other rooms, into other levels of culture. That was the objective, and we were going to do that by any means necessary, meaning different creative outlets. Jean, we were down to, like I was trying to make paintings, but I wanted to make film, and I got a film made. Ended up making the music for the film. Jean-Michel, I'm hipping all my friends to this new culture, by the way, because nobody knows about this. 1 or 2 records are out, the radio's not playing it. Jean-Michel was like, yo, really, I like that. Then he went and made a record called Beat Bop with a kid named Ramel Z. That was my protege that I turned him on to. And that's like, so that was what we would have continued doing. Other friends of ours that we were hanging with, at the same time we were putting the movie Wild Style in effect, they decided to make a movie too, capturing the real, raw, downtown scene that we were all in at that time. And they picked Jean-Michel to star in this film. This was even before his painting career really took off. That film is called Downtown 81. You can pull it up on YouTube after the podcast.
Yeah, after.
And see Jean, just like it was at that time. I'm in it, doing a little scene, doing some graffiti on a little building in the East Village, and then we all going and party and dance together, which is a reflection of how we hung out and what we did. So it was so much of that stuff that was our little world that a lot of aspects have exploded. And Jean is one of the biggest because it just continues. They're literally making a film right now in New York called Same Old Lives. That was Jean's graffiti tag before he started doing the paintings as Jean-Michel Basquiat. Him and another guy, Al Diaz, used to do this thing that they call Samo, which was short for same old shit. Yeah. And they would write these very clever little poetic kind of phrases and statements that caught people's eye. Nobody knew, like, who are these people doing this? That's another kind of graffiti. And it turned out it was these two. Primarily Jean was the star of the duo, and then we clicked and emerged. So a fascinating story. I love just seeing what's happened with him. So, but that's what I started to say before. I love seeing all of the attention, the excitement, but I still wish Jean was here, because it would be dope to be like, damn, homie, can you believe this shit? Like, what? Can you I mean, with so many aspects of the culture. Just the way people still embrace hip hop to this day. It's phenomenal for me that it continues and it reinvents itself. So.
And being in Nairobi, I'm sure you've seen where we put our graffiti on the cars. Have you seen our public transportation?
I made a post, the matatus, they're called. I made a little post on Facebook. I don't post that often, but when I'm really inspired, let me share this with people. So I described the Matatus as a combination of like hip hop, street art, lowrider culture. It's definitely got essences of that. And they're beautiful.
And there's a whole culture around it. A lot of our young people in the city, when a new Matatu is coming out, of course, all decked out, there's a whole celebration in the city. Oh. Like they meet in the city, and I know my producer right now is giving us cutaways. Hopefully we've got the copyright for it, but it is a whole thing.
Yeah, there's a Facebook page that I saw, and they have them, and they play. One I saw was a whole reggae one with tribute to Gregory Isaacs, and then they bounce up and down, which is where I got the whole lowrider connection.
And the screens inside, it's a whole universe in there. Like you don't know what time it is. It's like you left your house at 6. It's like, is it still morning? Because it's blue and red in there. Let
me just share something, which I don't know if you guys may not know much about this, but this was another one of those things that a lot of people see it and go, this is some weird white folk stuff, if you will. It just seemed really crazy. And I kind of thought so too, but then I've got wild, crazy friends, and some friends went, and I said, man, I gotta go check this out. You had Burning Man. And so I went to Burning Man in 2010, said, let me figure this stuff out. And as soon as I got there, I was like, oh my goodness, I got it. It reminded me so much of the art scene we took part in back in the 80s. It's like an anything goes arts festival, essentially. No judgment, come. It's I don't want to go too deep into it, but I loved it so much. The creative expression totally reminded me of the scene in New York in the 1980s when all of this stuff came together, and with Jean-Michel and Blondie, and all of this stuff exploded. And I liked it so much that they realized I liked it, and they asked me to be on the board. So I'm a board member of Burning Man. And I've gone about 6 or 7 times, and yeah, it's incredible.
I always say I want to go to Burning Man. Then I see the dust. I just see everybody just like,
yeah, it's dusty.
I'm like, can you see anything?
Yes, it is. It gets dust, the dust, baby. And what the dust does is fascinating. We all want to be clean. We don't want to I have to go in and take a shower. We have to get ready. No. We all are dusty, and that dust is everywhere, and it's on everything. And it kind of, at a certain point, you go, okay, we're just going to be in the dust. And it breaks down for that week or however long you go to Burning Man. A lot of the things that society is built, an entire city is built from nothing in the middle of the Black Rock Desert in the state of Nevada that is a complete functioning city. Other states send mayors or governors send people from their cities to see the work that Burning Man does in case the city has a major disaster. I mean, a medical, like a police. There's like a street, there's a grid, and there's all these things that happen that people individually put together and program. Nobody brings in a group to perform at Burning Man. People that have the wherewithal, that have their own camp and their own team, bring in a hot DJ, black coffee from South Africa, or this one from here, or the guys that play the EDM stuff come in. But there's more people of color now figuring it out like I did, and like, okay, I got this shit now. I want to come here and do my thing and represent for us and bring a whole different sound. And so that's happens at Burning Man as well.
Which is a running theme in your life. You get into spaces and you're like, I want to bring my culture here. You know, when you're in art, you're like, I don't see a lot of people from where I come from, so I'm going to bring the culture in hip hop, you know. Pioneer, bringing rap to MTV, you know.
Boy.
And it was a space where, you know, they were not playing any...
they weren't playing black music for the most part.
Yeah. And you're there like, yo, what's good? What's your name? I'm called Tupac.
Yes.
I'm like, and that's at that time nobody knows who this guy is.
Yeah.
You know, well, and when I say nobody, I mean commercially.
No, you're
because the
right.
streets
Very
knew him.
few knew who he was, or any of the artists, if you were. And that was another incredible thing that happened. That kind of also grew out of other connections that have been made, making inroads into what we refer to as the downtown scene in New York at the time. That was where the creatives, the artists, you know, the outcasts, everybody was at. And all the radicals and the activists, too, had always been centralized in this part of Manhattan. And so, yeah, I mean, being down there, it all, I drifted off. And
How important do you think your show, MTV Yo, was to the culture,
Right.
especially hip hop? Because, you know, at that point, people weren't playing, and TV is a big medium. And
Yeah.
you're someone who understands mediums because you started off in the trains and then got into the galleries and
Yeah.
now into film. And you know that this could be potentially life-changing for hip hop.
Well, for me, MTV was a really exciting thing that happened. This channel that plays music videos all the time, and nothing was like that. Cable itself was still a new thing. Everybody didn't have it. You know, cable was like cable TV. The picture's always clear. People can curse. There's a little nudity. I was like, what? On TV, it was a big thing about seeing cable. Here comes this music channel. And then you get to watch it, and they're barely playing any black artists. But it reflected what radio was in America. It was very segregated. Pop essentially meant white. And the R&B or the black is, you know, there were other names for the music that we made it was segregated. So MTV just kind of mirrored what radio had been doing. They were getting heat and pressure. You know, they were pressured somewhat to play Michael Jackson. They weren't representing the full spectrum, basically, of American music. You would watch, but you'd become frustrated when I'd visit somebody that had cable. And there was a guy that I knew on the scene, on the downtown scene, this white guy, Peter Doherty. He knew moves I was making, moving, you know, connecting with Blondie. By the way, when Blondie, in what grew out of our connection and the meetings and the friendship we developed, and I like to refer to it as a cultural exchange, because they were the first people to introduce me to Andy Warhol, who was one of the pop artists. I had liked his work and what he was doing in the 60s. I would tell them about all these ideas I had, graffiti, the music, hip hop, describe the scene in the Bronx. You know, the guys are fly guys and the girls are fly girls and whatever. Surprisingly, they made a record they included rap in the record. They rapped, shocked me. I knew they were into it,
Yeah.
but I didn't know there was a big pop group, one of the biggest groups in the world. They made this record and they shouted me out on the record, talked about hip hop, don't strain your brain, paint a train. Mm-hmm. All these little things Debbie, the lead singer, put in her own way. And that became the first #1 record where a lot of people heard rapping for the first time. And once again, they were the first people to buy paintings from myself and Jean-Michel. This guy Peter that had the idea for the show was in MTV's ear. We got to do something. These records are starting to sell. We're not doing anything. This is a new thing.
Yeah.
It's barely on radio, but look at the numbers. Run DMC, LL Cool J, these records were selling like crazy. So he talked them into trying. He was like, I got the right guy to host the show, and they said it was me. And I never thought this was going to happen. I'm like, give me a break. But I was flattered that I was being thought of in that way, but this was not my thing. I'm not trying to be this on-camera TV guy. But it happened. And he said, how would you want to do it? At that time, all the VJs on MTV were in a studio with a green screen with crazy images going on behind them. VJs would be on for 2-3 hours at a time playing Duran Duran or whatever the rock group was out of England. It was like whatever. I said, I don't want to be like that. I want to be able to move around, go to the street, go to places, be in Harlem, be in Philly, be in Compton, Miami with Luke, where the music is coming from. I want to talk to people there. They said, okay, we're going to make that happen. And then it happened, and the ratings were the highest ratings MTV had ever. It was crazy. They thought that the Nielsen rating system was broke. It couldn't.
How?
What the hell is this happening?
Yeah.
And that was phenomenal. And so that now thrusts me on TV as the person introducing this new music to people and interviewing these artists in their own environments. And so people like that made their television debut, people like Tupac, Snoop, NWA,
Yeah.
you name the artists that really defined the culture for the most part. I interviewed them on my show, became friends, and also directed videos for a bunch of them. Because once again, I learned filmmaking, making Wild Style, so then I got to direct. Like I directed Snoop's first video where he turns into a dog. What's my name?
What's
I made
my
that.
name? Snoop
And the first
Dogg.
videos for Latifah and
That's interesting.
gang of stuff. So I got to, another creative outlet because I have this energy. I have to be creating projects. I have to have stuff going, and that became
I mean, there's
that.
so many things I'm hearing from you, but I want to tell you a fun fact. There's going to be many, many. I auditioned to be an MTV VJ.
For MTV Europe or
Yeah, in Africa.
Oh.
When they were setting up MTV Africa.
MTV Africa?
Yeah, but
Ah.
Vanessa Mdee ended up getting it. I'm not mad because she really did a great job. Yeah,
okay.
she did so good.
That's
man.
nice.
Shout out to Vanessa, who's now in Atlanta.
Ah.
Yeah. But, listening to all this networks and your life is fully expressing your artistic flow, because a lot of artists get caught up in, I must release that hit song, which is where music ends up going. It becomes about the money. It becomes about making that hit song. It becomes
Yeah.
about being number one,
Yeah.
rather than expressing yourself as
Yeah.
much as you can. And from what I'm hearing from you is the more you expressed yourself, the more you spoke about, the more you'd network.
Yeah, that's
Yeah?
important. Yeah, I did.
The more you'd network, not sit in the studio and
It's
with
true.
your cups and with your drinks and
Yeah.
with your homies, just,
Yeah.
you were going out into spaces that your average art people at the time weren't going into
That's
those
true, you're
spaces.
right.
And the conversations you were having would lead to something else happening.
Correct.
Right?
That's brilliantly stated. That's exactly what happened. Yeah.
A lot of artists who I've worked with,
Uh-huh.
you just want to be in the studio, or if you're an artist creating your art, you just want to sit in the place and just draw and paint and paint and paint, and then put it out there and hope for the best. But from your life story, and which I've seen multiple interviews, I've read
Oh, wow.
so much about you, is the networking. And artists find networking difficult. It can be difficult, especially in multi-genres of, if I'm an artist, I'm networking with artists. If I'm a musician, we're hanging out with singers. You know what I'm saying? If I'm rapping, we're rapping,
Right.
But finding somebody moving easily in different genres and excelling in them and finding space and expressing yourself,
Yeah.
and not just that guy's the artist. No, he's a video director. No, but he's also an MTV host. No, but he's also a rapper. It's like, yeah.
That's very well said, and you're right. And artists, take note out there. It's not for everybody, but if you can move around, if you can diversify your circle, if you will, to expand, if you're truly creative and you're truly open to the creative process, that will inspire the creative process. If you're only focused on getting to the bag, that's not a bad thing, but it typically doesn't create a career. It doesn't lead to longevity. Because when you get the bag and then you have a lot of money, you quickly acquire a lot of bills, and then you become pressured to, do I break off and do something new and different, or do I follow that same thing that got me this little bit of money so I can keep paying this mortgage and these bills? These are big decisions that I understand. Seeing hip hop develop, where most people taking place on the music side were poor, living in housing projects and stuff like that. It was very humble. It was still very humble. Of course, you got some nice clothes, maybe a little jewelry, or gifts for moms and stuff like that. But people get caught up in that, and so it's very important, if you can, to diversify, keep yourself open, check other genres, look at those who did it before and did it well, and understand why. Like, that's how I get down. Like, I study. Like, I know, once again, just not to dwell on Burna Boy, but very young, I got exposed to Fela and clearly understood what he was doing. Blown away. When I saw the record Black President, once again, that's one of the things that when I met Jean-Michel and we started to hang, when I saw Jean-Michel had the Fela record Black President, I was like, dude, not everybody knew about that. I was like, dude, you know about him? I was like, yeah, high five type shit. You feel me? Like,
type
what?
Shit.
Yeah, like, whoa. Like, so he was open to different things, different frequencies, you know, listening to this, listening to that. Yo, I can do that. I can do this too. Let's figure it out and get to it. And I think along the lines of doing that now, it's so much easier. The equipment, the tools, film. A lot of times when people wanted to be filmmakers, their dream was to go to either NYU in New York or USC. And these are schools rich enough to have the equipment you can put your hands on and get to use. Your iPhones are capable of literally making like a feature quality film if you know how to set your iPhone up right. Yeah. So it's a remarkable time when you can get access to the tools to do things if you really lean in. And so. It's
interesting you mentioned technology because NFTs, what are your thoughts? Did you?
Well, you know, I'm basically underneath it all a very serious nerd, and tech has always been a big curiosity for me. I've got serious friends out in the tech world, and I'm always loving, because when the DJ hip hop thing developed, and you'd be in the park jams in the early days of hip hop, the DJs, if you hadn't heard the story, would break open the base of a streetlight, and they knew which wires to tap their system in to use power from the city for free. If you hit the wrong wires, you was getting electrocuted. That was intimidating. You had to understand what you were doing. And the DJs figured that out, knew how to manipulate their sound systems and stuff. When I got to first talk to these guys, they felt like essentially nerdy guys like me beneath the whole cool veneer, which I am cool. No? But the DJs would be like, oh yeah, and they would go into tech talk, and I'd be like, oh shit, yes. And I felt a kindred spirit. So the technology and doing what, let's say, Grandmaster Flash and them did with the turntables was completely wrong. You're not supposed to put your fingers on the record, let alone manipulate it manually. Yeah. Change the world, where then the technologists started building that into the technology as the stuff has elevated. And so it's very important to be aware of the tech, because the tech is developing rapidly. Now, non-fungible tokens, NFTs, yes, very aware. They kicked off and went crazy during the pandemic. I watched, as a visual artist, I didn't want to jump right in and be like, oh, I just want to go for the bag, because the numbers on some of those things were insane. But it was a bit of a bubble initially that kind of crashed. I do believe the NFT, non-fungible tokens thing, is going to come back, because, and then I'm also a big crypto fan. I mean, I got crypto early on because I got tech friends that explained how significant this was. It was hard to imagine, like, what do you mean? Can you tell me again what this means? I used to think Bitcoin was an actual coin when you see the illustrations and articles, and then I really understand it's some very advanced mathematics, and I got it. And so I wish I brought more when I did, but I did, and I have it. So I'm very enthused about the ability. And then back then, early on, being that I've been very curious, I remember reading about, I think it's referred to as microbanking and M-Pesa, which was, I remember reading about that in the beginning. I wish I would have invested then, because I'm now using it. I'm blown away how technologically advanced it is to be doing these transactions through your phone. This is remarkable. And so it's literally the cutting edge of technology happening right here. It's not happening in America yet. It's so crazy in America, I don't know if it will, because there's a lot of wild things going on. But it's exciting to see it being implemented here, and I just love it.
So you're pro-tech. So last, I think it was earlier this year, as somebody who has crafted your art, when someone sees your art, they'll be like, that's That's his style. When you see Basquiat to us, Jean-Michel to you, when you see his art anywhere in the world, well, there's very many close, what's they called, clones.
Yeah,
there's like a lot, right?
It's unreal. These people have
It's crazy.
Just but it's analogous to the early hip hop for me. All the rappers that really define the genre, they clearly and distinctly sound like only them. Like Bismarcky doesn't sound like Big Daddy Kane, who doesn't sound like Rakim, who doesn't sound like, LL Cool J, who doesn't sound like Snoop. That was important, that you had to be unique. If you sound like somebody, your homies may, you sound like Jay-Z. You sound like this one or that one, or, Playboy Cardi or whatever. For that era of artists, that didn't work at all. And we were not trying to come out sound like anybody, trying to work on.
But I think, to credit to our artists now, it's because at that point, you are the blueprint. There's nobody you're copying. You're just looking. And then also, there's not too much radio people infiltrating your brain for you to create.
Good point,
you're not watching too much music videos. You're not on social media scrolling. Oh, my God. Yeah. And then you go into the studio and you're thinking it's, this is a unique thing you're creating. And you don't realize that you were listening to a mix sleeping. Wow. And the sound is imprinted in your brain. Yeah. And you went into the studio and you created this, and then you go put it out, and the copyright tells you, strike. What you mean? This came from my brain. But forget that. Earlier this year, you've created your style, you have it, and then AI, ChatGPT, replicates. Like I could make your art. There was this. I forget the name. I've been struggling to remember the animation producer is putting it here on the screen. This Japanese style that has been created over decades, right?
Anime? You mean Japanese anime?
Yeah, anime.
Yeah.
And then here it is being replicated in seconds.
That's okay. So that's
so you're pro tech at this point in tech. Are you protecting the tech?
Well, that's very interesting because. We are living through a really amazing time of an accelerated development of technology, AI, crypto. It's really, really equal to when, and I'm an early adapter, mid-90s, I had a computer, I was emailing, talking my friends into, dude, this is crazy. Trust me, I went on TV and you could search YouTube. I did still doing your MTV Raps to demonstrate how this works. AOL online. This is email, electronic mail. Who knows email means electronic mail out there? I'm that kind of nerdy guy. But I do want to say, though, it's a crazy time. And so it's important to learn and read and understand how these are tools, and if you get a grasp of these tools, then if you're really creative, you'll figure out a creative way. A lot of my paintings, if you go to my website, fab5freddy.com, fab5freddy.com, and you go to the art section, you'll see some examples of my recent work. I've created all my imagery digitally because I'm into the tech and the way hip-hop redefine technologically how to play records and then how to make music playing records, if you will. I was like, wow, that's incredible. That was a revisionist use of the technology, and I like that, a disruptive use of technology. Boom. I want to make art using these tools as well. So I've created the imagery for the last bodies of work I made digitally, then have the work printed on canvas, then I'll add additional mixed media, additional painting, etc. And some of the last work I've made that I exhibited at a big show at the Saatchi Gallery, a big street art show, Beyond the Streets, was a series of works that I'm expanding on now, developing, and it's also early stages of developing this as a feature film, on the subject of black pirates during the, you've seen the Pirates of the Caribbean and that whole era. Well, the reality of that is, which many people don't know because we haven't told the story as it should be told, but at least 30%, if not more so, of the pirates on those ships were of African descent, because a big impetus for the wealth that the pirates were taking was from the slave trade and the rum and the gold that they were, looting out of in countries where we are from, in Africa and the Caribbean and whatever, bringing back to build European empires. The pirates, which were against the monarchy, many of them, not all of them, and some had equal participation of people of African descent, and they were pirate captains. So I depicted a series of paintings of black pirate captains, of black pirates, if you will. And I'm going to expand on telling the stories, because the whole pirate genre in film, in literature, is primarily fantasy made up from very few early sources. And, the whole walking of the plank and the patch on the eye, and certain tropes that are all like kind of more Hollywood, if you will, than actuality. The hook and the this and that. It's just like the
wooden leg. Is that
thank
real?
You. The peg leg, similar to the Westerns.
2 peg legs, guys. 2 peg legs.
Yes.
That's pushing it.
But similar in a way, the way I looked at it, to the way Westerns, which is a huge genre of American movies and enjoyed by people around the world, black folks invented a lot of these pirates, cowboys, a lot of the cowboy rodeo things, and we were active and very renowned in doing that, but it's not depicted in this storytelling, depicted in the films, because we didn't get to make those films. And so we didn't, tell us. So that's something that I'm fascinated about. Using technology to create this imagery, basically, is it. So the point of it is when you take a look on my website, you'll see some of these pirate pieces that I did, and a lot more coming, as well as I've got the outline of the screenplay, which is in effect right now. And who knows, I might even have to use some AI as it's developing so rapidly. I mean, I'm tapped in with some people really on the cutting edge.
So if you woke up and your AI, your style is on
now,
AI.
Now that's a problem.
What would you do about it? Like, would you?
Boy.
Yeah, because at that point, the whole world is already made.
That is a bit of a problem I'm going to acknowledge, as I'm excited about playing with and using it. It has, and I've heard and seen stories of certain illustrators who've earned their living with a certain style. Yeah. You could literally go into some of these image generators like Midjourney, or new ones are coming out, Google VO2, VO3, wild, wacky names. China's competing aggressively, outdoing some of the stuff that's coming out of America. And these guys, guardrails of some sort need to be set up. Yeah. It's happening so quickly, just like in copyright with music and stuff, and with sampling, and things have gone on. It's like a lot of the laws that have been written are so analog and so old. And things are happening so quickly, they're not able to catch up, and they're cornballs and don't understand this stuff themselves. So it's a really crazy time. And some of the visual artists, there are problems with some of that stuff. And when people talk about, dude, you could say, you could tell Midjourney, give me this image of you, Kwamba, in a Basquiat style, or this illustrated style, or that anime artist style, and it will spit that out in seconds. Now, I hear there's some guardrails being built to acknowledge that. I'm not sure of all of them, because once again, but there is some problematic areas, I will admit, and that's good that you're up on it like that.
I want us to go to your website, because the moment you land on your website, man, the grass is green.
Yeah, the grass is greener.
Grass is greener. In Kenya, cannabis is illegal.
Yeah.
Right? And we kind of touched on it at the beginning on how, if you do research, like, for example, let me tell you some of the things that are illegal in this country that people probably don't know. Like witchcraft is illegal, right? It's in the Constitution. As early as, I think, 19 or 1890, they put that in the Constitution as a law. And then, of course, there's so many crazy things that are illegal, right? Marijuana. So then you do your research. It's like, what happened for them to sit down and say all in favor, all against?
Right.
Like, what was such a priority for this plant, right? And then you realize the priority was international. It wasn't. It was an
Correct.
international pressure,
Correct.
including the witchcraft. It was just for the colonialists who couldn't understand our ways.
Yes.
And so they had to
Yeah.
criminalize it.
It's very
a beautiful story.
unfortunate as you see and understand and unravel the history of certain things like that and why things were made illegal. And so, wow. So in terms of cannabis, 5 years ago I made a film, once again called Grass is Greener, on the history of cannabis in America and its connection to America's music, from jazz all the way to hip hop, including reggae. Because I grew up in a cannabis household. My dad was very close. My dad was an accountant, but he was very close with Max Roach, who was a pioneer bebop jazz drummer, along with, you know, Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, Max Roach, my godfather. And my dad and his friends all indulged in cannabis growing up as a kid, which was illegal. No, you can't, you know, you can go to jail, which disproportionately many black Americans were put in jail for cannabis, which I also like to point out, no one has ever died from using the cannabis plant. But what happened was racism in America, and after alcohol prohibition ended in the 30s, they then went after cannabis and created a completely false narrative that this plant will drive you criminally insane, you will murder, you will rape, you'll do the worst things if you smoke this plant. They targeted jazz musicians that they knew were using this plant. White folks that enjoyed this new jazz music wanted to come and hang out, and they wanted to, hey, don't let your white daughter or your sister go and be around this, because if she smokes that weed, she'll go crazy and she'll be making love with those black folks. It was a bunch of stuff that they pushed to get cannabis criminalized in 1937. All lies, all like a lot of just, they made up a bunch of stuff. There was studies done way back then that proved this is not all the stuff you're saying, and it could be medically beneficial to people. But they continued to prosecute people of color the most. People that were down with the counterculture, you know, protesting the way America was treating certain peoples, they would put those people in jail because they sometimes indulged in the use of the cannabis plant. So that was the story that I lay out in my film, plus showing the musicians and the musical history and showing the blatant racism that was used to get cannabis criminalized. Then I was curious myself, well, I understand the story in America. Why is it in all these other countries around the world that never had a quote-unquote cannabis problem, why is this plant, which has confirmed medicinal benefits, criminalized? And the same guy, Harry Anslinger, that led to cannabis being criminalized in America in 1937, still had influence in the 60s. So he got the United Nations in the charter to include cannabis under like a narcotics umbrella. So all these countries then had to agree to criminalize cannabis. That is essentially why cannabis is against the law, criminalized in many countries. More than 30 states in America have now legalized cannabis for medical or adult, you know, legal use, and many countries in Europe have legalized cannabis for medical. And so when my film came out, Grass is Greener, once again, you could see it on Netflix, I got really moved. I told the story of a black man, to get into the criminal justice stuff, named Bernard Noble from Louisiana, that was given a 13-year hard labor prison sentence for 2 joints worth of cannabis. That's about 2.5 grams. And his case was celebrated by many criminal justice advocates because it just was like, what are you doing? There's already medical cannabis available in dozens of states and cities. The medicine is helping people. It's not like the opioid crisis brought on by medical doctors prescribing oxycodone, which after your prescription runs out and you're addicted, you have to go to the street and buy heroin. Cannabis can help some of those pain issues that people have, and that's working. But you're still putting people in prison in a bunch of southern states to fuel the for-profit prisons that unfortunately America has. So I was really moved. I learned a hell of a lot in the process that I didn't know. And I said, man, I want to do something. So doing something was creating this brand called Be Noble, named after Bernard Noble. We decided we would take care of him. He's living lovely now in Kansas. And we also donate 10% of our revenue in the different states to organizations helping people that have been in prison for things like nonviolent cannabis possession, because those laws are still on the books in a lot of places. And now we're learning in many countries around the world, they haven't been as harsh on the prison side, I don't think, but people are becoming educated that there's medical benefits to this plant that really sincerely helps people. No one at all has died from use of any cannabis products. No one. So what's the beef? And so that people becoming more aware has chipped away at the illegality in America. And so with the brand that we started to raise awareness, Be Noble, we were blessed to make an arrangement with the biggest cannabis company in the world, Curaleaf. And so they license our products in 8 states. We run the show, but they grow the cannabis for us under our supervision. And we have, they began as, Curaleaf, cure people. So they started out, and so we're in all of the Curaleaf stores in the states that we're in, as well as in the New York market, and that's developing. But we were blessed to make an arrangement and acquire a German pharmaceutical cannabis company called Can Pharma that was going under. So we now own that, and we have licenses to move cannabis around Europe, into Germany. Cannabis is being grown in Lisbon, and here we have a situation in England, and we're looking to do the same here in Kenya. So my business partner on all of this, Ron Samuel, is a brother from California that grew up in the legacy cannabis space, growing really in the deep part of the cannabis science, cultivating. He's that guy. He's been living here now over 6 months, setting up shop. We've been in talks with the government to hopefully try to set up some sort of a pilot program because it's such a vibrant country, particularly what's going on in Nairobi. We would like to help Kenyans get access to this plant in all its forms, the flower, edibles, tinctures for various issues that Kenyan people have, to help get to sleep at night, to help boost your appetite. There's things that are confirmed
Anxiety.
The plant would help with. So that's the mission we're on, and that's why I'm in Kenya right now, because I want to see it for myself.
But it's so crazy because a lot of Kenyans in Kenya, marijuana is illegal. So even just to have the conversation that, let me give you a perfect example. In our last election, there was one of the candidates was advocating that he was going to legalize marijuana.
Okay.
Well, of course, that did not work well for him.
Oh, wow.
Because, to first deal with to have counterculture
Right.
around, it's not bad, to say all these things.
Right.
I know there's aunties of mine who are watching here and already just going like, because you spend so much time being taught just how bad this drug is. And I also want to ask you a question, because I represent the streets and people, who are watching. A lot of, if you go to mental institutions right now, one of the largest is called Madari, right? I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. A lot of the patients in there are being treated for marijuana addiction. Their mental health issues have been triggered by marijuana. So when there are people who watch this and go like, it's very irresponsible, that's why we're fighting it, how do you counter that?
Well, I've heard about, there were some issues with that here in Kenya, and the way I've heard about it, I mean, this is completely, well, there's something similar that happened in America, and it's from a substitute cannabis product that is, no, it's not a cannabis product. It's packaged like it is, and it has chemicals in it. In America, the things that happened in New York where people literally were going crazy in the street, just absolutely going crazy. It was a product called K2, which is like a substitute simulated marijuana product that's completely fake, not regulated, chemicals in it, who knows what, that were driving people crazy. It would be a big news story, and they would find like, what's happening? Oh, they were smoking K2. This was the product name. I understand that some stores may have it under other names now, the synthetic cannabis, but it's been really a nightmare. And what I think could be happening in Kenya, because, come on, there are people, millions of Americans smoking. These things, we've never heard this. As to the addiction, cannabis is not physically or medically addicting, like heroin. When you don't have it after being hooked, you get excruciating pain, you're in agony. With cannabis, it's psychological, I understand, if you're addicted. So you may have issues, but it's not like when crack cocaine was the big thing, or when heroin addiction and people have to rob, steal, and kill and maim because they physically are going crazy and need to get a fix. So I think it's, once again, some of the negative storytelling around cannabis, and I think it's not being depicted correctly. They're lumping it in and trying to make it seem like that. But I think if there's better research done to look at what those patients were actually using and what they were smoking, I think they would find that it's not the cannabis plant. Because in America, it's been going on. Jamaica, I mean, as we know, you would hear.
But have you seen Jamaicans dancing at a party?
I see Jamaicans.
That shit's crazy.
What do you mean, Jamaicans?
My auntie, my SDA auntie, 7th-day Adventist, would be like, that's why you don't smoke weed. It makes you crazy. You've not seen the parties where the lady will be grinding on and the guy climbs like it's
that's
WWE stuff.
Yeah, I've seen that.
It's fun.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah, you know, I'm very close to the Jamaican culture and the Jamaican scene. In fact, I directed most of Shabba Ranks videos in the 90s. Trailer Load of Girls, Mr. Loverman. I directed over 60, 70 videos. But the Jamaican thing has always been like close to my heart. Growing up in Brooklyn, the Jamaicans were everywhere. And then I got to really immerse myself in the scene and the culture with your MTV Raps as well. We would go there to cover Sunsplash and the concerts. And then as I was directing a lot of videos, when I first saw Shabba, man, I said, man, this is like an African guy, like the way he looked and his whole energy. And then I got to direct a bunch of his videos. So got close to that scene. But then in my film, Grass is Greener, I talked to Damian Marley, who's one of Bob Marley's sons, about cannabis. And one of the things that we also talked about was Peter Tosh. His record, which was a pro-cannabis record called Legalize It, was made over close to 45 years ago now, where he pretty much sang about, hey, legalize it and I'll advertise it, but he also broke down the various medical afflictions that cannabis helps. Yeah. He might have got one or two off, but essentially cannabis is medicine. And what we have to understand of that, and we have to reprogram and re-educate people. It's been 80 plus years on the American side of lies and just wrong information, bombarding people. And when scientists really did research, you can Google and look at the research. Look at the help you can get from the cannabis plant. I mean, the pain relief. There are people in football that play that American football, and the players, what's the player, Troy, the brother that was a running back, who wanted to continue smoking cannabis in his football career, Ricky Williams, who I've met. He's now in the cannabis business. His football career was ruined, but now the NFL, they're on the verge. They've stopped testing people for cannabis use because they see the benefits. These guys with their knees and their bodies are banged up. They don't want to get strung out on opioid drugs to relieve the pain. True. Let me use, if I can put some cannabis cream on here, will that help? The CBD, will that help? And they go, oh my God, this is helping me. And I don't have to take these harsh opioids. So that's a big part of what has led to cannabis now being a $30 billion business in America and growing, and a $2 billion business in New York alone and growing. And we have B Noble on the market in New York and these other states. The medical benefits, incredible, and just feeling good and not, and listen, 100,000 people a year die from normal alcohol usage, just normal drinking. People poison themselves with alcohol. I mean, that's what it is. So I think it needs to be a little more reevaluating the benefits of this plant and understanding how many lies people have been bombarded with for a long period of time now. And so Grass is Greener, when my film came out, the woman that wrote the legislation that we now have in New York, which also has written into that legislation, is that people victimized by these unjust cannabis laws, primarily people of color, get first shot at licenses to open businesses. So because of that now, in the short period of time that New York has had legal cannabis, we have the most dispensary owners of color in the country. Just trying to fix the wrongs that were done. Yeah. And a lot of the legislators, the woman, Crystal Peoples-Stokes, invited me up to Albany, that's the capital of New York, to speak to other legislators about this. And they were like, oh my God, can we arrange a screening of your film? Because I've been trying to explain to my constituents, oftentimes people of color, that there's very significant benefits to this plant, to this medicine, even for older folks. For aches and pains. No, you don't have to smoke it. You can get cannabis in different forms. You can just rub it on your aching back, your neck, your knee, your elbow, and get relief without having to take strong pharmaceuticals. So these are things that I think have pretty much pushed open and changed people's minds, seeing that there's confirmed medical benefits and that people haven't gone from cannabis to heroin. And then these states ease in adult use. The tax revenues are then used to do things in the city and the state that's extremely beneficial. So that's the story that's been going on. And we understand this is the same conversations, talking to people, explaining, and helping them see the light, so to speak, that they've been misinformed largely. And so we know that Africans are extremely smart. Everybody's super connected, especially the politicians. They're seeing cannabis open up in Europe. They're seeing Germany go adult use, Spain, various countries. So it's only right that Africa, which, come on, ancient Africa, you better believe cannabis was being used as herbal medicine, because that's essentially what it is.
It's interesting you talk about our politicians, because as we end, that's the person I want you to speak to. You know why? Because 2017, I was on the radio telling people that Beyonce's dad, Mr. Knowles, was in Kenya. He set up Bangi Inc.
Ah, yes.
Yeah. And in a country where it's illegal, the conversation is, okay, what are the undercurrents that we're not understanding, right? And because it's still constitutionally illegal, it means, just like the work you're doing with Grass is Greener and speaking to the legislators, if you were to speak to Kenyan legislators, who the work has been done to vilify something that could change lives, especially in a country where healthcare is inaccessible to most people, right? Yeah. So whatever wonder drug is available and affordably available, right, would be an option. What if you were to make an appeal, for example, because I mean you're in this space already, and you're looking to set up business, and I'm sure you'd want some of your clients to be from here. Right?
Oh no, absolutely. We see the potential for a thriving business here.
Yeah. So what would you speak to the legislator? What would you tell them?
What I would say to the Kenyan legislators is to please watch my film, Grass is Greener, because it will show you clearly, concisely, with factual evidence that's confirmed what was done to criminalize this harmless plant that has killed no one. You'll see the systematic racism that was used by Harry Anslinger and the way it was depicted and the way the story was told. it was all wrong, and they were able to criminalize the plant and then use the criminalization to target people of color that were challenging what was going on in the system in America, particularly 60s and 70s, when people were standing up and fighting against a system that was not just. And it was Richard Nixon, when he was the president, Vietnam War going on, and people marching in the streets all over the country. There was a study done in the 70s that he pushed under the rug. An official study, confirmed doctors, experts, they said, wait a minute, all this stuff you guys are saying, that this is not true. And there may even be some beneficial aspects of this plant. Nixon said, oh, we're going to push that under the rug. And then one of his chief aides is quoted in a very famous quote. John Ehrlichman basically says, we knew we couldn't blatantly just, I can't remember the exact way he phrases it, but we couldn't arrest people and treat black folks or these people that we don't like, these hippies, these people challenging what we're doing. We couldn't go at them the way we used to, but we can go at them under the guise of arresting them for their use and possession of these substances. So it was kept on the books, if you will, to be able to neutralize the opposition to a very corrupt president, if you will, Richard Nixon, Watergate, Oh boy, we don't want to go down that road. But I think that would be honestly a way. And then there was oh man, The Emperor's New Clothes is a book. Oh man, I can't remember the author's name. But it was the first book that kind of came out that really detailed some of the lies that were told about the plant and the benefits that were there that could be used medicinally. I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but his wife had cancer, and he crossbred some strains of cannabis specifically to help his wife. That became a really renowned strain. I'm going to be really upset with myself when then, but once again,
Producers got it over here on the screen.
Yeah. We'll have it pop it up on the screen and stuff. But yeah, man, it's just been a lot of lies and misinformation. And I think it's important for people, for the legislators here, of course, which are very sophisticated. As I drive around and see this really amazingly cosmopolitan, growing city and also country, is something that I think they'll quickly see how beneficial it can be. And then because of this rich soil and this, just potent area, they'll be able to produce some of the, I think soon, once they get over the hump and understand the benefits of cannabis, we can produce some of the world's best. It would be great to have some incredible cannabis.
Some Kenyan Kush.
There's a strain, Kenyan, because there's a strain out of South Africa is very Durban Poison, by the way, is a highly regarded elite strain of cannabis that I do believe was essentially cultivated in Canada. The cannabis scene as it now grows, those people that, some people from Amsterdam and some hippies from California have crossbred various strains like Kush. The Kush strain, I think, originates from the hash, Afghanistan hash plant mixed with a Hawaiian or something. There's all this different crossbreeding and things that are happening at a really high level, similar to what's going on in the Bordeaux, Champagne regions of France, to get these quality strains with flavors and feelings that are just really elite. And I think there's a growing audience of people that are understanding. I mean, you guys all have a liquor bar, a little bar, liquor cabinet at your house, right? Boom, I think once again, cannabis will be a nice addition to that for your friends that want to come over and have a nice smoke.
I love that. He says, get over the hump, get into the hemp. You know what I'm saying?
That was dope.
I'm sitting with the guy. I'm sitting
sitting
with Fab Five, man.
And also, just to let you know, hemp is a part of the cannabis plant. It's like a cousin to the cannabis plant that has none of the THC. That is the active ingredients that get you high.
Yeah.
That's one of the many cannabinoids in the cannabis plant. In America, because it's been so criminalized, although that's unraveling, the federal criminalization should be lifted soon, if you will. But there's so many things that are extremely beneficial that we're getting our hands around now.
I love that. So even when we speak about marijuana or cannabis, as we agreed, it still ties into your even as you're talking to Kenyans, you're like, listen, find your voice in this marijuana game, okay? Find your strain. Find, just the same way in graffiti, you were finding your voice. In the music scene as well, you're finding your space. In the music videos that you produced, you directed, in your MTV, well, you were putting hip-hop on when nobody was putting hip-hop on. That is a common theme in your life.
Well, it's amazing. It has really ended up as that, and it's pretty good. I mean, it's been a blessing. It kind of comes from, once again, as I lay out in my memoir, which will be coming out in March, the title "Everybody's Fly." I realized how much of it came from the environment I grew up in.
I mean, you mentioned some of my fave jazz guys. He said Max Roach is his godfather. He mentioned Dizzy, and he's just like, they're just hanging out, just the reefer. Of course, you were going to be who you are.
Well, you're so right. And I didn't understand it all growing up because it's all so unconventional. It's like I didn't go to art school. I wasn't the best student, but I was learning what I wanted to learn on my own and pretty much teaching myself, just very curious. So, but a lot of my inspiration came from those guys. As I've gotten older, I constantly reflect back to things that I picked up from my dad and his friends. Because my dad was extremely well read. My dad wanted my middle name to be Lumumba. My mother wasn't having it. That's because when African countries were shaking off the colonial yoke, my dad was so excited. My grandfather was a Garveyite. My grandfather worked with Marcus Garvey. This is the first black man to organize us around the world. The reason many African flags have red, black, and green colors, these are colors that Marcus Garvey put in effect. He wanted black Americans to get and connect with Africa, to start doing business, doing trade, getting our own pockets right, and then we could sit at the table with those people and be more on a level playing field. Garvey organized hundreds of thousands of black folks throughout the diaspora, and a person very much like the guy that went after weed, J. Edgar Hoover, went after, before he was the head of the FBI, went after Marcus Garvey and basically took him down to quiet his voice. I feel like a part of what we're doing right now is like an extension of that, because there's always been present for me. Marcus Garvey was pretty much wiped out of American history, the gigantic impact he had. But it was reggae artists like Bob Marley, like Burning Spear, I'm like, who are they talking, who are they singing about? No one remembers then I learned, I thought that, your grandfather worked with him, and he was about that life, about us getting busy, showing our intellect, forming like Voltron, and putting pieces in place for us. You know what I'm saying? And so I come from that, and as I've learned more about it, looking back and understanding those influences have influenced things I've done. The first music video I direct, it was a blessing, was a song, My Philosophy, for KRS-One. He was one of the first conscious rappers to break out at that time, and also to be on a similar wavelength. His album cover mirrored the image of Malcolm X. My father was following those kind of things as well, and was in the room that sad day in the Audubon Ballroom when they took out Malcolm. So these things were talked about as a kid in the house. I'm playing with toys, but I'm hearing mentions of this and mention that. And then Max Roach, as my godfather, was really excited about hip hop, and we did a performance together. And it was something that scared the hell out of me, but I stepped up, we did it. You can go on YouTube and see a little bit of that performance of myself and Max Roach, who was very much excited about hip hop. And so the cool that those guys had the frustrations that they had coming up, conversations I heard as a kid, as incredibly intelligent, sophisticated, creative black men, how frustrated they were that they weren't able to control their form the way they wanted to. They didn't get to write the articles. They didn't get to run the record labels. And that stuck with me and made me want to control and run things in the creative endeavors that I had. Hence the idea to make a movie to change the narrative that luckily got made. Wild Style was kind of motivated by these dudes were frustrated that they were just as intelligent as we are now, but in that time in America in the 1940s and 50s, they were still lynching us. And when Max went on tour in the South, they were treated like dirt. That was still going on, like in his lifetime. So I'm definitely inspired, and those things are in my DNA.
Yeah.
Without being too,
Superfly.
Try to
Everyone.
make it happen.
Is it everyone or everything?
Everybody's Fly.
Everybody's
So the title of the book is from my relationship connection with the group Blondie, and the things I told them about what I was trying to do, and this hip hop thing, which was new, and they were very supportive. They went out and made a record called Rapture, which became this big #1 hit record around the world. And the first line, when Debbie, after singing a little bit, she starts to rap. And the first line of the rap is Fab Five Freddy told me everybody's fly.
Yeah.
So it connects to that.
This brings a nice close, because I'm asking myself, I definitely want a signed copy of this book.
Oh yeah,
because I know that
I got
there's
you
so
covered
many,
like carpet, honey. I'm gonna take care of you, straight up and
Covered
down,
like
baby.
carpet.
I'm cute. I got to have you. What?
when I'm listening, and I can't wait to read this book just to see what, according to you, is the cherry. What is the one thing, if you were to say that moment that you're like, I really remember that moment. That's my. Because you've had so many.
Yeah, they have been. I've been so blessed, and there's been so many moments. Once again, a great story I like to tell, and it's the story around the record Rapture. So we're really close with Chris and Debbie were the nucleus of the group Blondie.
Yeah.
And I would go up to their apartment. I'm living in Brooklyn, and I'd go hang out with them, and we'd talk all this stuff. Just like this conversation now. We'd be talking, and I'd like to do this. I'd like to do that. And like Chris was really into that. He loved graffiti. He supported all these ideas. So then they go off to make an album, and they come back a couple of months later, and they invite me up to the house to play me some of the songs. They play me a couple of songs, and then they put on this one song. I can see they're really looking at me. And then Debbie starts off singing, this is the song Rapture.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, it's got a good beat, shit is bumping. Then she starts rapping, and I go,
Damn.
Oh man, this is incredible. I totally thought this was just a goof track that they had did in the studio, like just to show that, Freddie, we heard everything you were saying, and we were playing around, and here's our version of that. And I heard us rap, and Fab Five Freddie told me, everybody, she's doing this little rap, and I thought, man, this is so cool. I was just blown away. But once again, I was sure that this was just something that they was playing around and did this little track as a throwaway. A month later, I'm in Paris after having one of my second art exhibits at a gallery in Milan. And I run into members of the Talking Heads and the B-52s. These were other new wave groups that I had met while I'm hanging out on that scene, the downtown culture scene in New York. We're hanging out, and a couple of members of the Talking Heads and me leave this party in Paris to go to this restaurant, La Coupole. And while we're in the cab, I hear this Rapture song. And I go, yo, how does this cab driver have a copy of this song? This song, I'm thinking, is just something that they did. And it was Chris and Tina, who were the people I'm in the cab with. They actually were in the Tom Tom Social Club. That was a group they put together. They was like, Freddie, that's the new single from Blondie's album. It just came out. Man, I said, oh my God, this is a real record.
With your name on it.
With my name on it. I'm in a cab in Paris hearing it. And they told me, so when they played this for me, this was a real record. And I never thought they were going to put this out. It became a #1 record. can't make it up.
You can make it up, man.
Yeah, it was a blessing.
Fab Five Freddy.
Yeah.
You guys have to get this book. It's going to be out in March.
Coming in March, early March. Everybody's fly. Yeah.
But in the meantime, I don't know where I can get Wild Side. I'd love to watch that.
Wild Style, I do believe, Wild Style, you might be able to rent it on YouTube, at least see a little bit of it. My film, Grass is Greener, on Netflix. If you guys pay your Netflix bill, you can see that. And and then, if you want to know more about Be Noble, that's b-noble.com, the website, and my website, which is my name, Freddy.com. You can see little snippets of a lot of things I've done and will continue to do, music videos, things I've written, paintings I've made, and much more coming.
Do you own, how many Basquiats do you own?
Okay, that's a good question people get asked. I've had several. What artists typically do when you're friends is we trade work. It's like, yo, I'll give you one. We trade, which we had did. But it's crazy. I've got a couple of things, but I can't keep them at home. It's kind of a little crazy.
I was just going to ask where your hotel room is at. Do you walk around with them?
No, it got so wild.
I would rob you.
We've had to put them in secure storage. Well, because it's just the security of it all. Yeah. So. You just can't keep it.
And I love your art as well. Make sure you check out fab5freddy.com. I don't know who's calling me in the middle of this interview. Yeah. That's been an amazing conversation. And have you had any Kenyan food? It's a yes or no. We'll see whether this episode will air. And it's dependent on whether you've tasted any Kenyan food. You've been here a week and a half.
I've had I have some jollof, some dope.
That's not Kenyan.
It's Troy White has been my guy.
We gonna do that.
But I've been wanting to go check out some street food, which I want to do. I know they can grill. When we went to that polo thing last week, they was grilling some. That was Kenyan style. Right?
Thank you so much for watching this. It's been fun. It might never air. It might never air. I'm taking it. We're going to eat now.
Following Troy. Come on, Troy. That chicken place, is that Kenyan? That's not.
And on that.
Galitos.
What?
Oh, God.
Galitos.
Galitos.
The roast, Galitos.
All right.
I got to get right.
It's been nice talking to you. Guys, if you haven't subscribe. This is a place we bring you the best conversations.
This is my guy over here, Troy White.
It's going to happen before you leave, though. I promise.
And I've been asking, where's the street food? I want to give me some real, what do the Kenyans eat? Because you know what it is?
It's over.
Like in Harlem.
Mature. Yes,
Stop it.
Mature. And you know where you had it first.
Oh my goodness,
we eat mature.
Us up.
Mature.
But I want to get my Kenyan food on. I need to know.
He said mature.
Hey, I love it. I can't pronounce it. I love it.